Before we dive into the many questions that arise from the Holocaust, we must answer the most important one. What was the Holocaust and why do we study it? The Holocaust can be defined as the attempt by Nazi Germany and its collaborators to exterminate the Jewish race. I call it race because under Nazi ideology, Judaism was considered a racial group. Now, the Holocaust tends to be only associated to the mass extermination of the Jewish people. Although it is a very important part, exterminations, by that I mean organized killings, only started in 1941. However, oppression, public shaming, and abuse started way before that. With the rise of Hitler in 1933, his clear anti-Jewish ideology developed. Anti-Jewish methods were implemented in the regime. So, we can define the Holocaust as all the years of Jewish suffering under the regime. Between 1933 and 1945, around 6 million Jewish people died. The Holocaust shook basic notions of humanity and really showed us how dangerous an ideology can be. It also showed us the dark places a society can reach and how compassion is not always prevalent amongst human beings. Though there were rare instances of compassion, they cannot overshadow the gruesome moments lived during this period. Going back to our Holocaust definition, 1938 is considered a turning point. Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass, is a night that historians argue marks the beginning of the Holocaust. The public abuse against the Jews became rampant. It was during this time that concealment was no longer necessary within the regime. This is the picture from Kristallnacht, November 1938. Why is it called Night of the Broken Glass? This name makes reference to the shattered windows in shops and synagogues of the Jewish community. During this day, Nazi officials started a violent riot and pogrom against Jewish communities. This is also a day where thousands of Jewish men were arrested for absolutely no other reason but being Jewish. Here you can see how many men were rounded up. And in this picture I find particularly interesting the amounts of people just watching. You could argue some of these might be other Jewish community members. However, I can assure you some of these are German citizens. Although unimaginable human conditions prevailed, the systematic murders of the Jews commenced in 1941. 1939 was when Hitler first invaded Poland. However, the other half of Poland was still under Soviet control. Earlier that year, he had signed a secret agreement with the Soviet Union, in which he agreed that the Soviet Union would keep half of Poland and he would keep the other half, in exchange of a non-aggression pact. However, Hitler was not a man of his word, and in June 1941, he invades the Polish-Soviet region. This operation, called Barbarossa, also extended Hitler's troops all over Soviet territory. Suddenly, the Nazis found themselves with millions of more Jews under their control. This is when the solution to the Jewish question was pressured. The Jewish question referred to the idea of Europe being Jew-free. With so many Jews under their new command, this question had to be resolved quickly. From this point on, millions of Jews were killed, first in shooting pits or killing sites, and eventually gassed in camps. Some camps and facilities were built only for the purpose of mass murder. Others were concentration camps, meaning work camps, where Jews were worked to death. It is in this manner that by the end of the war, thousands of ancient Jewish communities that had flourished in Europe for more than 2,000 years all of a sudden vanished. It is true that their ideology focused on their Jewish question. However, they committed horrendous human crimes against other groups, such as gypsies, Polish people, or political opponents. The Holocaust was the most radical and exceptional genocide. I want us to study the bigger questions that also shed light on our humanity. How did a group of people come together to organize the mass murder of 6 million people? How did such a radical ideology achieve German power legally? Did the communities react? Was there any Jewish resistance? And how was life truly in Nazi Germany as a Jew? We're going to be exploring all of those questions. We're going to study all the complex factors that allowed this historic event to take place. The Night of the Broken Glass was only followed by more radical and extremist rules. Jews were eventually completely segregated from society, were forced to wear the Jewish star on their clothes, and were eventually deemed as non-citizens. These were people that were stripped from their humanity, from any sort of attachment they had to their homeland, and treated as subhumans. Humiliation and abuse were the key components of the terror in Nazi regime. Here, we will study all of that and more. In our next video, we're going to study Nazi ideology, starting with anti-Semitism, which is the sentiment against Jews. Anti-Semitism was not new. It had been in Europe for a long time, and we're going to study how Hitler used this as a base for his modern ideology. What was the difference between old anti-Semitism and this new Nazi anti-Semitism? And how did it play a role in the eventual extermination of the Jewish communities in Europe? Join me for our next video.